Imagine that you are on a night duty in your busy emergency department when your team is handed over a 60-year-old male patient who presented to the triage with chest pain, diaphoresis, and repeated episodes of vomiting. He's restless, he's hypotensive, and he's got cold, clammy extremities. You start the resuscitation, you get an ECG done. Well, you can see some ST elevations in the anterior leads, but wait a second. The ECG machine interpretation says an RBBB. Now, what is an RBBB? Sure, you know something about a left bundle branch block or an LBBB. Let's understand the right bundle branch block in more detail as to how it is generated and how it is manifested on a surface ECG and how it can really change your management in the patients in the emergency department. Now, if you stick to the end of the video, I'll tell you about some of the mimics of the right bundle branch block which actually are not RBBB. I'm Dr. Naman Agrawal. Let's get started. Before we can really understand the abnormalities of a right bundle branch block, let's just quickly recapitulate what a normal electrical conduction looks like. So the impulses start from the SA node, which is the pacemaker. It goes down through the interatrial conduction system to the AV node. From the AV node it goes down to the bundle of His, and it goes down to the left and the right bundle. From the bundles down, it goes to the Purkinje fibers, and from here the depolarization of the ventricles take place. In this process, the ventricle is depolarized. First the septum, which gets depolarized from the left to right side, and the ventricular free walls are depolarized from endocardial to the epicardial surface. Now, what goes wrong in the right bundle branch block physiology is that the right bundle gets blocked. All the conduction from the AV node down goes through the left bundle. The left ventricle gets depolarized as it should have been in the normal situations. Right ventricle, however, gets depolarized in a slow aberrant conduction. This leads to a wide QRS complex of more than 120 milliseconds. The septum again is depolarized from left to right side, which is normal because the left bundle is properly functioning. Next event which happens is the left ventricular depolarization, and then there is a slow and aberrant right ventricular depolarization. Now the P wave is formed normally, a first positive deflection which happens, then a negative deflection because of the left ventricular depolarization, and again a positive deflection because of the right ventricular depolarization, followed by a repolarization, T wave. So as you can see that this forms an M pattern in lead V1 and V2. Now this M pattern actually can have some amount of variation in the morphology. It can look something like this. It can look something like this, which really is just a broad R wave. So the next important finding is presence of an M pattern or a prominent R wave in V1 and V2, which are the right sided leads. Now what happens is just the opposite in the left sided leads, that is V5, V6, AVL and lead 1. A P wave is formed uninterrupted. Then we see a negative deflection, which is the septal Q wave. We see a left ventricular depolarization followed by a slurred and wide S wave, which is because of the right ventricular slow depolarization. Now the third important factor hence becomes a slurred S wave in lateral leads. I hope these 3 points are clear. So these three form the diagnostic criteria. As you can see in this ECG, there is an M pattern here, or also called as the RSR dash, because there is an initial R, then there is an S, and then again there is an R, so you denote as an R dash or R prime. There is a deep and wide S wave in the lateral leads V5, V6. There is a term called an incomplete RBBB. The only difference here is that the QRS complexes are less than 120 milliseconds, but rest of the criteria are met. Now some associated features. Now we have discussed the appropriate discordance in the LBBB video, the link of which you can find in the description below, which means that in the leads where there is a positive QRS complex, you find some amount of ST depression and T wave inversion, which is normal. So these are the leads on the right side, that is V1 and V2. There is an RS-R dash pattern, which is a positive QRS, and then there is a negative T wave and some amount of ST depression. Now we can see that the right ventricle is getting depolarized for a longer time, which leads to a right axis deviation. But if we focus on this particular ECG on the side, you find that there is a positive R wave in lead 1 and a negative R wave in lead AVF, which means that the patient has got a left axis deviation. The patient has got an RS-R dash pattern, has got a wide S wave here and a wide QRS complex. So the patient has got right bundle branch block, but instead of a right axis, the patient has got a left axis deviation. So whenever you see this kind of a condition, you should always consider the presence of left anterior fascicular block in addition to right bundle branch block. Both of these together constitute the diagnosis of bifascicular block. Now, if you want to understand the concept about bifascicular and trifascicular blocks in more detail, do let me know in the comment box below. So yes, left axis can be present and you should be vigilant always in a patient with a right bundle branch block. Look at the axis, and if you find there's a left axis, it's not an isolated RBBB, there's an associated left anterior fascicular block as well. Now, many pathologies of right bundle branch block are because of a strain on the right ventricle, and many pathologies like cor pulmonale, rheumatic heart disease, etc. lead to right ventricular hypertrophy, which simultaneously manifests also as right bundle branch block. So RVH and RBBB can manifest simultaneously. The important point, however, to note is that the RVH is diagnosed on voltage criteria, but if the patient's ECG has got an RBBB, this distorts the QRS complexes in such a way that the RVH can no longer be diagnosed based on the typical voltage criteria. Hence, the best way to diagnose RVH in presence of an RBBB is through an echocardiographic study rather than isolatedly on a surface ECG. Now, if the patient has got a right ventricular hypertrophy, there is a pressure overload to the right atrium, which leads to a right atrial enlargement, which manifests as a positive P wave, a tall P wave in lead 2 and lead V1. Other ECG abnormalities can be a manifestation of those specific diagnoses as per the etiology. Now, talking about the etiology, what really leads to a right bundle branch block? Is it just a benign condition seen in chronically stable patients like cor pulmonale, which may be stable, not really an emergency scenario, or patients who have pre-existing heart disease like some cardiomyopathies or rheumatic heart disease, for example? Well, you should understand that it can very well be a new manifestation to the patient's ECG, and if it is so, it can lead to devastating clinical outcomes. So some of the common killers hiding behind the diagnosis of RBBB include acute pulmonary embolism, a STEMI, and some metabolic causes like hyperkalemia and sodium channel blocker toxicity. A typical manifestation of acute pulmonary embolism is T wave inversion and ST depression in V1, V2, or up to V3. So this manifestation is because of the development of a right ventricular strain. If the strain further worsens, it leads to the formation of a right bundle branch block in a patient with acute pulmonary embolism. So whenever you see that the patient has clinical manifestations consistent with acute pulmonary embolism, and you go down the diagnostic pathway, and once you get an ECG and you see a right bundle branch block, you should think that the RV is compromised, and the management should take this into consideration. Now, ST elevation, LAD occlusion STEMI causes an anterior STEMI, which is manifested as ST elevations in the anterior leads, that is V3, V4 typically, or it can extend from V1 to V2 if the septum is involved. Now, if there is a proximal LAD occlusion, one of the manifestations is the development of a QRBBB, that is presence of a Q wave followed by a positive R wave and broad R wave associated with ST elevations. So if this kind of a thing is seen in V1 or V2 in presence of an anterior STEMI, you should always think that the patient has got a proximal LAD occlusion. How does it really make a difference? A larger area of myocardium is at risk, so these patients are at high risk of development of cardiogenic shock. These patients really do not do very well on thrombolysis and should be prioritized early to a primary PCI. So it's very crucial to recognize the proximal involvement of the left anterior descending, and RBBB can really, picking up an RBBB can really make a difference in that patient's particular outcome. If you look at this particular ECG on the side, you will see that the patient has got a sinus tachycardia. The patient has got slightly wide QRS complexes. There is definitely a QT prolongation, and you see that the patient has got deep S waves in the lateral leads. This is a typical ECG of a tricyclic antidepressant toxicity. From the mechanistic perspective, it is a sodium channel blocker drug, and sodium channel blockade leads to a right axis deviation or a right bundle branch block pattern, which can be seen in patients with sodium channel blocker toxicity. Now, hyperkalemia also is a sodium channel blocker, so the manifestations can be similar to a sodium channel blocker toxicity. However, hyperkalemia itself is very notorious and it can cause any ECG change or any ECG abnormality. So whenever you see an ECG which does not fit into one particular syndrome, and it's kind of bizarre, always think about hyperkalemia. However, right bundle branch block can also be present in other conditions like cor pulmonale, typically seen in COPD patients, various cardiomyopathies, various rheumatic heart diseases, and some congenital heart diseases as well. So these are some of the etiologies of right bundle branch block. Now if you recall the case, now you can see here that the patient has got a tall R wave. The patient has got deep S waves here, deep S waves, and the QRS looks kind of wide. There are ST elevations here, and the patient has also got a Q wave preceding the R wave. Well, this is an anterior STEMI. But not just that, it is a proximal LAD occlusion. And how do I know that? Is because of the presence of a QRBBB pattern. So whenever you see a patient with chest pain and a new RBBB or a QRBBB, think of STEMI and think of a proximal STEMI. So what do? You prioritize this patient for primary PCI as soon as possible. Now, if you remember that I told you that I'm going to tell you some bonus tips about things which are not RBBB. They look like RBBB, but they are not. An RBBB typically manifests as an RS-R prime pattern. Now, this looks like the rabbit ears. If you look at a rabbit from behind, you see these two ears. So this is the left ear of the rabbit, this is the right ear of the rabbit. Now, these two ECGs in front of you, you can see that in the first one, there is the left rabbit ear which is taller. In the right one, the right rabbit ear is taller. Especially when you have to differentiate and approach a patient with wide complex tachycardia, you have a doubt between ventricular tachycardia and a supraventricular tachycardia. So, if you see that the patient has got a left rabbit ear which is tall, it is suggestive of a ventricular premature complex pointing towards a ventricular tachycardia. Now, if you have got a right rabbit ear which is tall, it is suggestive of a right bundle branch block. Right means right. Now, if you want me to make the video in detail describing the differences between the VT and an SVT in the emergency department, do let me know in the comment box below. The next is an Osborn wave or a J wave. Now, if you can see here, you can see some M patterns all across the board, right? So, if you remember that M pattern is seen in lead V1, V2, it is suggestive of RBBB. But if you see M patterns everywhere, it's really not an RBBB or for that matter LBBB per se, because other criteria are not really met. Now, what exactly is a J wave is that if you have a QRS complex like this point is the isoelectric point or the J point. At this point, if you start having some bleb of this kind, this is called a J wave. And it can be seen in many conditions, one of which is hypothermia. The most commonly quoted conditions or recognized conditions with J wave is hypothermia. So you should not get confused. In the RBBB, the morphology is seen in the lead 1, in addition to widening of QRS complexes and an S pattern. In this, you don't see any S pattern in the lateral leads, and the M pattern is seen more in other leads and not in the right-sided leads only. Another condition is the Brugada syndrome, in which you do see an R S and R dash, but this is associated with a typical kind of an ST elevation, followed by a negative T wave inversion. This is called the coved type or type 1 Brugada pattern. There is also a type 2 Brugada pattern, which is not very specific for Brugada syndrome in general. Now it's a different discussion altogether, what is Brugada syndrome and what are the conditions in which you can find Brugada pattern. If you want me to have a separate video discussing about that, again, do let me know in the comment box below. So these are the conditions which may look like right bundle branch block, but actually not. And if you miss this, you're going to miss crucial diagnosis in the emergency department. So the takeaways from this particular lesson are, for an RBBB, you'll see an M pattern in V1 and V2. You'll see a deep slurred wave in the lateral leads. You should always remember the killer pathology, especially when the RBBB is new. If there is an associated left axis deviation, think about an associated LAFB along with right bundle branch block. So always look at the axis as well. Now in this clinical setting of ischemia, a new RBBB should prompt you to diagnose a proximal LED lesion, and these patients should be expedited for primary PCI because they are at very high risk of decompensation if they stay in the ED for long.
Thank you for watching this video. Do like and share this video with your friends. Subscribe to ECG Sadhana and follow us on Facebook for more exciting content related to emergency ECGs. If you like my work, please support me on patreon.com. Until then, stay healthy and keep saving lives.